our parents, Ottis and Audrey Cave, and both sets of our paternal grandparents, Emery Lee and Lily Cave, and James Lewis and Susan Ann Highball. In addition, it has the graves of 3 of our father's brothers and sisters, 2 who died relatively young, William Ernest and Bernard, and Wilma, who married Wilson Taylor, and who also was the minister that married my wife and me and married Gordon and his wife. In addition to that, it has the grave of our mother's sister, who was next in age to her, Roberta, and our mother's sister, Lula, who married Ed Gunterman, are buried in this cemetery. The church is significant in that our grandfather Highball was one of the founding, or one of the founders of the church, and our father and mother attended church here from the time they were married until they both deceased. Baptist Church at a relatively young age, and some of our, as you heard from the other video that was done, some of our basic moral foundation comes out of that church. And so we have a lot of very wonderful memories of this cemetery and this church.
Okay, so let's get a picture of each grave, John. So you might have to point them out, but on the different graves.
I will. Missy?
Yes.
Lee said he tried to play the CD and it was nothing on it.
Yeah.
Marsha did.
There were some blanks apparently, so you got one of the blanks. I will give you a real one.
Our house was, if you go right to that point beyond the clearing there where the woods begin, was over that hill probably another quarter of a mile. And where we went to grade school was back in this direction, a half or a mile away.
How long did it take you to get to school?
Oh, 15 minutes.
For a mile?
You were booking.
Yeah.
I got to take your teacher's pony to water sometime.
You did? You rode the horse?
No, the teacher did.
The teacher rode the pony. Oh my gosh.
You were teacher's pet.
Teacher's
Yeah, tried to be.
That's why you
It
married
didn't
a
work,
teacher.
When the road had been gravel here?
It had a teacher.
Yeah.
It had a teacher.
Somebody was grabbing too.
Yeah, it's just dirt roads.
And then
Did you ever go to Wendall when you were a kid?
Aunt Wilma and then mother's sister, Aunt Lizzie lived there. And an interesting thing about that was it's about 100 miles. And in the early 40s, the way the roads were, we'd probably get up and leave as early as we left to come down here today, and we'd pack our lunch. That's how long it'd take to get down.
Let you pump and patch and stuff.
Patch your tires.
You knew you were going to have some flat before you got down.
Okay, well, we'll load up and go down and see where the house was that we grew up in, which doesn't exist anymore, and then we'll head back out for the rest of it. Okay, this is where our home sat, about where this house is, and it faced out toward the road. No, I'm sorry, it faced down toward the barn. The barn sat, that was about where our crib, where we kept the corn for all the cows and horses, and then the barn sat on this side of the crib, and the house sat facing that way. And the spring that we carried water from was on down through there about 200 or 300 yards. And, had a chicken house up on that hill.
Had what up there?
A chicken house.
Chicken house.
And the little house that Uncle Otis and Uncle Ansel were born in was just over that little knoll there, back sort of in the woods. And
How much farther did the property go back this way? Are you at
those woods,
that's about the end of it?
and then these woods, and then straight on back to back. The spring was basically on the end of the property.
Yeah.
But that area that we were was also part of your property?
Yeah, it went from here all the way up to the highway.
Okay.
By the way, yeah.
This is
Big. That's a lot. It's a lot to farm, but it's awfully hilly.
It's a little whippet.
Hey, Wendell.
And so you
Oh.
can walk from the house.
Hey. All the way up to the highway, and around the highway to, there's another field on the other side of the woods about the size of this field. And B, Kentucky, the post office where we got our mail was up where you see that little bitty building underneath that tree that's about to fall down? That was the post office.
Oh, that was a post
No way. Oh wow.
It's not sitting where it was then, but that was the building.
That barn actually was the building?
Yeah.
Wow.
It had a little store in it, the post office. And then all this land went on down. It would lay in a triangle, or in a rectangle all the way down this way. It was 100 acres.
This was the home that all of y'all grew up in.
All of us grew up in, and
Where's the mill pond that you were
that's a long way away.
Oh, okay.
This was land was originally purchased by our grandfather Highball in about 1890. We stopped here because another one of my mother's sisters, Daisy, and her husband Ben Sturgeon ran a little store right on this corner over here behind me, and they lived across the street over there. And then this road out this way, about 2 miles, is where you would go and then head off over the hill in the Mammoth Cave National Park to the home site of where my father grew up, where Emery Lee and Lily Pearl lived until Emery Lee died. And then she moved out on the highway, which I'm going to point out to you as we go by, and we won't stop. Just over this hill, I'll slow down, and there's a house on the right. And our grandmother Cave ran a little bitty store there. And from about the 30s to 50s before she passed away. And then our cousin Oreen, it was the last cousin we have living down here, lives in a house just past where Grandma Cave had her little store. So I'll just slow down, and you can see on the right where this.
So this was the grandma's sister's store, and they
Right.
lived there.
And our grandmother.
Grandmother had a store down here.
Right, and then our father grew up back down this road off on into Mammoth Cave
is this
National
the
Park
way you
called
go?
the Big Woods.
Is that the way you go to get to the cave property site?
Yeah.
And so is there a gated road?
There is no road.
It just starts at...
It starts right at, you stop right where the park boundary begins and just head off over a hill about 2 miles, and you'd need a handheld GPS, and I've got the quadrants on the handheld GPS, and you can just take that and walk to it.
Is there a foundation left or anything?
Pardon?
Is there anything
Nothing
detailed?
there, but you can. That's where you can still see the tree where
Oh,
our dad
yes.
initials were carved when he was born in 1904. I think it was like at 1916 or 18 he carved his initials almost 100 years ago.
So you send our GPS to the tree?
It's just to the general area there. There's a spring there and by the spring is a big beech tree, and that's where his initials are.
Oh, cool.
But you can contact Mammoth Cave National Park, and they will provide a ranger to lead
take
you
you.
back in there.
Okay.
So if any of you ever
Summer vacation.
any of you ever want to take a journey back in there, you
Just
can
call
contact.
ahead and tell me what your family grew up there, and that's...
Yeah.
And what about the cave that had all the names in it that you... Is that
That's
part-
back there also.
Will they take you to that?
There's Wilson Cave, not a person, but actual cave that's back there, and our parents used to explore that cave when they were
Henry, be
kids.
careful, car's coming.
when they were kids growing up, and we tell the story. My dad used to tell the story about they made a wooden ladder to go down into the cave. And one time they were going down in there, and as they went down, I think the last person that came down the ladder broke. And to the high top of it was too high for any of them to reach. And my dad's brother Clyde was like 6'11", and they sat there. I think there's 7 or 8 of them, trying to figure out what they were going to do. And somebody said, "Well, we still got to get out once we explore, so we might as well explore. No use getting out now. We go ahead and do our exploring and then get out." So while they were exploring, they decided that 2 or 3 of them would get a hold of Uncle Clyde and lift him up. He'd be able to
Grab a hold
and grab a hold and pull himself up. And he did that, and then he went and got a big limb or something and pushed down there for the others to pull up on.
Didn't the ranger say that limb's still there?
That old broken ladder's still in the cave.
Oh, wow.
And no, you can't go in it because I intended to do that. Bats are in there, and there's this fungus called the white nose disease of bats, and any place that they are, their bats are breeding now. They're forbidding people to go in there because they might carry that fungus in there and destroy the bats.
Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense.
Now we're in downtown Cub Run, and that building you see over there was the store that our mother and dad ran in the 50s.
With a tin roof there?
One with a tin roof.
Okay.
And then the house behind us was the home we lived in the 50s while we ran the store, rented this house.
His actual house?
Yeah.
How old were you all?
I was 11 or 12. I said,
He was 20. Yeah.
Probably. He got appendicitis.
Was what?
What was that, bud?
He had appendicitis.
Your dad had appendicitis while we were living here.
In the senior year of high school.
And we took him to the hospital in Glasgow, and he had some surgery and had his appendix removed. Uncle Otis came in from Louisville from his job on Saturday to help Dad in the store, and he found Emery sick. And
he wants to tell that story. Move in.
You want to tell it?
Move in, Kevin.
Ooh.
Tell him what you were. Come up here a little closer. Tell him what you were doing. Look at Kevin.
Eating green apples. Got sick. Otis took me to Bowling Green.
Glasgow.
Yeah.
Had surgery. Too many green
apples.
Green apples. On this tree at the house, or was someplace else? Back of this house.
But it wasn't green apples, was it? It wasn't green apples, it was appendicitis.
Appendicitis, but he thought it was from the green apples.
What? So Uncle Ansel would come up and help with the store.
Actually, Uncle Otis initially went in partnership with our dad in the store, and then he just sold back out to our dad.
Okay.
Now, we're going to head on out. We'll go to Cane Run Church, and that's the last church that our great-grandfather Cave helped establish.
Okay.
Christy.
Now we're standing in front of Cane Run Church. This church is important in that it does 2 things as far as the Cave family history. One, it helps us mark the location of the last land that my great-grandfather James Clark Cave owned, because in the minutes of the formation of this church, it states that Cane Run Church was to be built on a corner of James Clark's land that he donated for a church. So we know this helps us mark a corner of his property, and I don't know whether it went to my left or to my right, but this establishes a corner of it. And it also is James Clark Cave there's official records that he had helped establish 2 Baptist churches, this one and Cave Hill Church, which we're going to stop at next. And so that's the importance of our stop here. And another interesting thing here is that our grandfather Emery Lee Cave has a brother, James Albert Cave, who, if you go right on up this road past the church about a mile, there's a cemetery off there on the left in the woods, and that's Emery Lee's brother, James Albert Cave, and his wife are buried there. And if you go on up this road till it ends and then walk across the hill, it's an area of, I think, where my father lived as a young boy before they moved to the land on Mammoth Cave National Park. And I have never been able to establish exactly where that land was, but I can sort of just get it generally located because of this church and where his dad lived and the property that was behind that. And you can't establish for sure because the Hart County Courthouse burned in 1930, so there are no official records prior to 1930 to establish deeds and things. So the last 2 or 3 years I've been trying to talk to people that are older than me that live in this area to see if they can help me run it down, and I haven't been successful in actually pinpointing that yet. So we're going to leave here and then we're going to go out and go over to the Cave Hill Church, which will be the first church that James Clark Cave helped establish. And it's important also because, and we'll just say that here so we won't have to say it when we get over there, because it states in the original minutes of that church that James Clark Cave gave land for establishment of that church, and it was named Cave Hill because it was located up on top of Caves Hill on his farm. The house was down on Bacon Creek, down below this big hill where the church is, and that has double significance because I feel pretty certain it was also the land where James Clark Cave grew up that his father Abner Cave owned. And when Abner died, then James Clark got the land and he gave the land for the church. So those are markers to mark some of the places that go back into the cave ancestry.
But Cherry Springs Church was Highball.
Highball helped establish it.
So is that how the caves and the Highballs got together, through church?
No, probably Mother and Dad probably, you know, most people back in the early 1900s married a neighbor or somebody that they, at churches that they met. Because that's basically where they met people, was at churches. So I am supposing that Dad probably came to Cherry Springs to go to church to see if there was any girls he could court, and he probably saw our mother there, and I'm supposing that's probably how they met.
And then we saw a baptizing stream down there. Did any of the brothers get baptized here?
No.
Any of our relatives baptized here, do you think?
Not of our direct line. Probably James Albert, our great-grandfather Emery Lee's brother, people were baptized here, I'm sure.
Where were you baptized? Cherry Springs?
No, they didn't have a baptismal there or anything, but I forgot. I think it was in Nolan River. We used to baptize people in.
Didn't you think
we used to have baptisms at the mill pond.
Nolan?
All right, well, we'll move on.
Moving on.
Where people had their wheat and corn and everything ground, and as the thing turned, it made the sound chuckle-luck. So that's how it got its name. And the original cave that came to Hart County was in about 1839, and that would be my great-great-grandfather Abner Cave. And Abner and many of his brothers and sisters and his father and his mother came to Kentucky from Orange County, Virginia in about sometime in the period 1810, 1812. The first official record I can find in the Greene County, Kentucky courthouse, that's where they settled initially, was a Kentucky tax rolls for William Cave, who was Abner's dad in 1812. But Abner, who was my great-great-grandfather, was sort of a wanderlust. He married and had about 8 or 10 children, came to Kentucky, went back to Orange County, Virginia, came back to Kentucky, then moved with a couple of his children to Marion County, Missouri. His first wife died sometime in that period of time, either while he was still in Marion County, Missouri, or after he'd come back from there to Kentucky. So he went back to Orange County, Virginia, and married a second wife named Elizabeth Booth. And then he came back to Kentucky and stayed in Greene County for a few years and had one son, James Clark Cave. And then when James Clark Cave, he was born in 1838, was about 1 year old, they moved from Greensburg, Greene County, Kentucky, over to back then the Chuckaluck Road. And that's where James Clark grew up, and then he helped establish this church. Then sometime he moved over to the Cane Run area and established that church over there about 1900. And our next stop will be Little Flock Cemetery, and that's where we will start looking at our grandmother, Lily Pearl Bennett Cave. That's where her parents are buried. And then we'll go from there to the Lively Cemetery, which is where James Clark Cave is buried. Okay, we're at Little Flock Cemetery, and it's located on Macon-Kessinger Road. And this is the burial site of my grandmother Cave's mother and father, James Madison Bennett and Margaret Elizabeth McCubbins Bennett. And I don't know how their daughter Lily Pearl and my grandfather Emery Lee Cave met. It was probably again at church, maybe here at this church or at the Cave Hill Church or at the Cane Run Church. But anyway, they met and married, and the Bennetts lived somewhere on down, about a mile on down this road somewhere, and I haven't pinpointed exactly where James Madison Bennett and Margaret Bennett lived. But they're in this cemetery, and they have a son, Clarence Bennett, that's also buried here. He was a veteran and a teacher, and he died like when he was early 20s. And
Veteran of what war?
World War
One?
I. And I think he probably kept his military insurance, and my mother always said that that Emery Lee inherited, or Lily Pearl inherited some money from when he died from his insurance, and that's what they used for money to buy the farm down in on Mammoth Cave National Park down there when they moved down there. So this is all we're going to see here, and we're probably going to backtrack some down. We're going to go to the Lively Cemetery where James Clark Cave, who is my great-grandfather Cave, is buried.
So how old is Little Flock?
I don't even know when it was established. It's probably older than that Cave Hill.
And did you all remember your grandparents?
No,
1905.
1928.
Okay, so none of you all knew them?
Now, one interesting thing about her, I have discovered that she was living with one of her sons over in Georgetown, Indiana, close where Uncle Ansel and Uncle Bill lived when she died. So there's probably a death certificate in Indiana for her that I've never got.
How did you find the? How did you find it where they're buried?
I
Did you track it down?
Track it
Did that
down.
record show that where people?
no. I think by the time I got interested in the cemeteries, I was doing online stuff. I know about some people that tracked it down, and I got some of that way. All right, we're in the middle of what's called Lively Cemetery, and it contains the graves of my great-grandfather and grandmother, James Clark Cave and Nancy Payne Shively, and two of their children who died young, Henry Wiley Cave and Ollie P. Cave. And it also contains the graves of Nancy Payne Shively Cave's mother and father, John S. Shively and Mary Craig Shively, and both the stones of John S. Shively and Mary S. Shively are disappeared right now, but I have a photo of the Mary S. Shively stone, and their graves were down in here, and there's some other Shiveleys right down in there. And it also contains the grave of one of Abner Cave's children by his first wife, Ophelia Cave, who married her double first cousin, another Abner Cave, who was a son of our Abner Cave's brother. And her husband, Abner Cave, died, and then she married a Henry P. Lively, and they're buried over in there. It also contains the grave of Turner Gibson and his wife, Mary Polly Cave Gibson. And Mary Polly Cave was a sister to James, a half-sister to James, no, was a sister of Abner Cave. And there was also another sister named Anna Cave who lived with Turner Gibson and Mary Polly in the 1860 census. She was an old maid, never married, and I am relatively sure, since Turner Gibson and her sister are buried over there, she's probably buried here somewhere, maybe without a stone. And my guess is Abner died sometime after the 1860 census, and my guess is he and his wife died in 1857. So my guess is they both are buried here, and there's no stone marking for them. So the original Cave who came to Hart County in 1838 is, my guess, he is here in this cemetery with his wife, and was buried by what was her only child, James Clark Cave. So since we have the Gibson sister buried over there in the late 1850s, and then Nancy Payne Shively Cave's mother and dad buried over here, and she was buried in the late 1850s. So my guess is that Abner and his wife were buried here, because his wife died in the late 1850s also. So that would just have to be speculation. And as I say, they came here from Greene County in 1839 and settled down to what was at Chuckaluk, down below Cave Hill Church. So if you want pictures, you can get the Gibson pictures of that. The Turner Gibson's stone was where I got the idea to get this stone fixed, because it had been fixed like that. And that's part of it. What your donation, it cost us $600 to get that frame built and put on.
It's worth it.
And that should preserve it from now on. especially since Martin's got all these trees out here.
So that's great grandfather.
Well,
That's my great, your great.
Great, great. Okay.
And then
And this is his wife,
That's,
Nancy. Right?
her great grandfather.
And this is his wife, Nancy.
Nancy.
Okay. And this
What's
is
the
their
P stand for?
Payne.
Pain. Yeah,
And this
Y-N-E?
one of their sons.
That
That
Henry.
one. Henry.
This
And
is the cave.
That's the daughter,
daughter.
Ollie.
Oh. Interesting. Why he is such a
Because she died real much
young.
earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
He probably died, I think I got it in my genealogy, in the 1850s. And I'm guessing,
They probably made their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's handmade.
That one, yeah, that one's.
I'm guessing that Abner and his wife are buried right in this area next to where James Clark's buried.
Yeah.
This is the oldest grave site from the cave line that I have found. This is the burial site of John Bennett, and his 3 wives are buried here. He was married to 2 sisters, Sarah and Martha. The nice name skips me right now. First married the older sister Sarah and had about 8 children by her, and she got sick, and her younger sister Martha came to help take care of the family while she was ill, and then she passed away, and then John married her and had 7 or 8 children, of which James Madison Bennett was one of them that was buried at Little Flock. Then after she had so many children, she died, and he married that one there, Frances Nunn, and altogether with 3 wives, he had 25 children.
Wow.
Well,
And
we're
this
descended
was
from
the old
second one.
Pardon?
Are we descended from the
We're
second
a
wife?
second
Second wife.
second wife, second sister.
We
And
know
I
where
just
she's
totally,
buried?
she's buried in here. All 3 of his wives are in here somewhere. And members of the Bennett family, some people from the 25 children raised money and put up new stones here and put the gate around and the fence around and cleaned this up, and it was cleaned up pretty good last year when we were here, but it's growing up again. This land was probably the original Bennett land in Hart County, and I think Lily Pearl may have been born in Greene County because her dad, James Madison Bennett, was in an early census of Greene County after he had married, and I think she might have been born right after that census, maybe the 1880 census or something. So she could have been born, just Greene County line is probably a mile away from here, so the Bennetts all live right in this area, and the Bennetts, from some of the 25 children, still own all this land. But, so this is the last cemetery that we'll visit from the Cave Bennett line, and this was my great-great-grandfather Bennett, so it'd be like Marcia and Scott and Misty's 3 greats, and then Eric and them's 4 great-grandfathers.
How did Bennett become Cave? How did the Bennett family become the Cave
Well,
family?
Emery Lee Cave, who was my grandfather, married Lily Pearl Bennett.
Yeah, that was after the very first cemetery. Remember, it's called Emory, E-M-O-R-Y.
So my grandmother Cave was a Bennett. That's how it got to be.
And John, will you take a still picture of that one?
Mm-hmm.
Baptist Church, and this is in the area of the Hart County where my mother Audrey Highball, her highball line and those auxiliary lines from the Highballs lived. This is the area where our grandfather Highball, James Lewis Highball, he went to school here. This is a little community called Hammondville, and during the Civil War, part of Morgan's raiders came to this little town of Hammondsville to do their marauding and plundering and stealing, and all the men from the little community got word that they were coming, and they got their guns and holed up in a blacksmith shop. Well, the raiders went to the one-room school where this was probably in the early 1860s, and my grandfather Highball said he was in first grade. And so they went to the school and demanded of the teacher to know how many men were holed up to fight them off. And the story I remember him telling, and there's different variations of it that's been told, was that they shot the teacher because he wouldn't tell. And my grandfather Highball says that he was so scared. It was summertime. Of course, there was no air conditioning. The windows of the school were open, and he said the windows were probably 6 feet off the ground. He jumped out of a window and ran home. Well, he had to run across Bacon Creek to get to his home, and he said that the water was about up to his shoulders, but he was so scared and running so fast that the water didn't slow him down a bit when he ran through that deep water. And there are written accounts of that where some of the children got out of the school and crawled. Back in those days you could crawl underneath buildings, and they crawled so far back up underneath the school building and they got hung. Wow. And once all of the raiders were gone and everything, people had to get shovels and go in there and dig them out.
Oh, no.
So can you imagine, like my grandfather, who lived long enough for me to talk to, told the story of when he was in the first grade and that happened.
Civil War.
And this cemetery here is all from my mother, Audrey Highball, side of the family. Her father, George Washington Highball, and Virginia Brown are buried here, and two of James Lewis Highball's brother and sister are buried here, Clay Douglas Highball and Adeline Highball. Virginia Brown.
You might have to do that one again because we had to try.
Virginia Brown's mother and father, who would be my great-grandfather Brown, William Martin Brown, and Christina Yates Brown, are also buried here. William Martin Brown was one of the early ministers of this church. There's a story that he and another minister were engaged in I read this in a Heron's History of Kentucky, were engaged in some kind of a religious debate, and William Martin Brown made some kind of comment religiously, and the other minister thought he was smarter than William Martin Brown. He said, "I don't think I'd ever make that statement in front of learned people," and he said, "I never do." And also John Durham and Mary Jane Lampkin Dye, who were Grandpa Highball's wife, Susan Ann Dye's parents, are buried here. And Mary Jane Lampkin Dye's mother and father, Jeremy and Sarah Amanda Bomar Lampkin, are buried here. So we've got on the Highball side back to like the third great for us here. And there's so many of those graves, we'll just have to go out and I'll have to look for them because I can't remember exactly where they are here. Virginia Williamson Brown. And she always told the story that when they migrated from Virginia, they were coming, I guess, over toward the Cumberland Gap to come through that way. And in West Virginia, there's Williamson, West Virginia. And that she was born while they were en route here in Williamson, West Virginia, and that's why she got the middle name of Williamson, but I don't think that's accurate. But it makes a good story.
It's a good story.
What does C stand for?
Huh?
CW. What is it?
DW.
George Washington.
Oh, CW.
Oh, George Washington Highball.
You see, my grandfather, his son, lived to be 96, and he was only, 51.
Come back, turn around.
Wilson Cave, where our dad grew up. As young men, young boys, they would explore that cave, and they would go in and they would write their initials in the rock on the walls and the ceiling of the cave. And I was told by the president of the National Cave Spelunkers Society that they saw so many names cave in the main room of that Wilson Cave that they named it Cave Boulevard. Wilson Cave, my dad and his brothers and the neighbor boys liked to go down in there and explore when they were 10 to 15, 16 years old, and they had built a wooden ladder to get themselves down. I understand the drop-off was about 8 or 9 feet to get down in it, and one time they were going in there to explore, and as the last person came down the ladder, it broke. So they were at the bottom in the broken ladder, no way to get out, and they were talking about, should we try to get out now or should we go ahead and explore? And they made the decision, well, the problem of having to get out won't go away, so we might as well explore and then worry about how to get out. And so our dad's oldest brother, Clyde, was about 6'11", and so they explored and came back, and they decided that three of the boys each could get a hold of a leg of Uncle Clyde and boost him up as high as they could boost him, and he could reach the ledge at the top, and he did, and he got out, and then he went and found a long tree limb and put that down for them to climb up on, so that got them out of the cave.